So the most important part of our show today, I believe, is this. What you see in the mainstream media, what Rachel Maddow's talking about, what CNN, MSNBC, what they're doing is disgusting. The establishment is exploiting this crisis to make more money at the expense of the panic of the poor and the working class. And this is a huge problem. So the Washington Post has this whole article on how the Fed is injecting $1.5 trillion into a short-term lending market to have to calm these investors' worries about the coronavirus. So we need to calm the investors, you guys.
Yeah, the
investors. Forget the people that are going to be out of jobs. Forget the people that are running out of food, that can't go to the grocery store because the grocery store is out of food, who can't get tested, who, if they go to the hospital, they're told, oh, we ran out of tests. We don't have enough tests. Shout out to our friend Mark Lane. Yeah. I mean, it is disgusting. I never want to hear again, ever, how are we going to pay for it? How did we pay for this? Where'd the money come from?
The Fed created money on the, I guess, on the order of the federal government. They're actually creating more money, not printed on paper. They're electronically creating it and giving it to all these banks and these investors, whatnot.
But
meanwhile,
poor
the people on the ground,
we don't have enough money for you.
You can eat a bag of Richards.
I'm just like, this is disgusting.
Breaking. We're literally bailing out the rich again as working people are losing waging hours, health benefits, salaries, and need food and supplies more than ever. The working class must see this as a direct attack on us. I'm not sure what it will take.
And that is my point, fam. I mean, we really, 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 really need to actually do something about this. People need to organize regardless of what's happening. They want you to not organize. They want you to stay at home, panic, do nothing, and disengage from shows like this, disengage from the political elections that are going on right now. They want you to disengage and panic because what does that do? That puts you in a circle where you're just panicking and you're scared and you go and you buy things and you're freaking out and there's no solutions. We need to find solutions. We need to not let this panic us. And unfortunately, that this is exactly what the mainstream media wants you to do.
And this is a tactic they always use. What happens is anytime there's a crisis or a shortage or something happens, a crash, the big banks always look to take advantage of it. They always look to deregulate more, get any more of their loopholes out of the way, just get them on a path to where they can do whatever the fuck they want and eventually crash our market while they run off with all the money. Remember Glass-Steagall, that was completely taken out of the books, and that allowed all these investors, these shadow banks, to go ahead and take your money and gamble with it. In other words, they didn't separate the two different types of banking from personal and investment. So therefore, they can take our money and put it into their investment portfolios and actually gamble with your funds. And that made a lot of these, bonds crash eventually, and people got screwed out of a lot of money. We're talking people's 401ks, all that shit. It really, really took a big beating back in the crash. We've seen The Big Short so many times. Yeah. So now what they're doing, they're looking for more ways that they can deregulate, get hurdles out of their way, and do what they want to do.
Absolutely. And again, I'm just going to mention this one more time. So these big banks are calling for Wall Street deregulation to fight the coronavirus. You guys, this is what they're doing. So they are using the excuse of the coronavirus to have these banks deregulated. And this is what Naomi Klein talks about in her book, The Shock Doctrine. And this is an important book that I think a lot of progressives have read. Yeah. But this is what they do when the wealthy elite use the confusion caused by a situation like this, a coronavirus or an epidemic, and the economic and disasters that happen after, to pretty much force through legislation this pro-free market legislation.
I love that word.
It's really
pro-free market.
It's disgusting. And so the Mint Press has a great article on it if you guys want to read it and get actual news. This is what we should be talking about. What these people are doing, what the elites are doing behind the scenes as people panic. They are trying to sneak in there all of this legislation to deregulate banks, offer $1.5 trillion to the elites, and also prevent you from gathering in a mass protest, you guys, this is a recipe for disaster, for pretty much quelling, suppressing any sort of dissent. And there is a huge amount of public dissent and anger right now, not only because of what's happening with our elections, but also how these people have dealt with, the government has dealt with this crisis and how unprepared they've been and the damage they've already done to millions of Americans by not dealing with this in the proper way. It's scary to think that we are just completely ill-prepared for this. I mean, we are probably one of the worst countries as far as preparation goes. And it's going to take you guys focusing on the real underlying issues, which is how they are going to use this to their advantage. And the next point I have is how the pundits and the DNC and the mainstream media are using this to pretty much destroy.
They're going to cancel the convention.
Any sort of uprising that is bound to happen with the amount of anger, right? The convention. They're going to try to use this to push Joe Biden through without your consent, without public approval, without any of this. So Ben Norton basically
love Ben Norton.
said,
Gray zone.
Yeah, exactly. MSNBC hosts are now openly making the case for why the DNC should cancel the Democratic National Convention, which is not until mid-July because of
the
coronavirus. Let's be clear about what's going on. They are exploiting this crisis to try to stifle democracy and silence dissent. Exactly, Ben.
We got to watch
Let's
this video.
This.
I interviewed Senator Sanders in Burlington, and one of the things I asked him about was what he thinks about the prospect of the Democratic National Convention being canceled and what sort of safeguards there should be, what sort of planning there should be at that point to make sure that the process is still transparent and fair and accomplishes what it needs to do. He said it was the first time he had been asked that question, which I was surprised by. I feel like it now feels the way things are going. Like there's almost no circumstances under which I can imagine a Democratic National Convention happening in Milwaukee this summer. Things are changing quickly, but I can't imagine they're going to reverse themselves fast enough that something like that could be viable.
If they cannot assemble under one roof as they are supposed to, that actually requires a rules change. If they have to do this remotely and everyone stays home, they're going to have to quickly get through a rules change that allows them to do that. I think they better get through some kind of rules change that certainly allows the option to do that, because it's all up in the air now. The idea of everybody being gathered, in July in one of these places under one of these domes is very hard to imagine as we sit here now.
Seems far-fetched. I mean, there is the chance, but we may not know it then. There is the chance that the virus takes the seasonal sort of dip that the flu does. But, of course, we don't know that. Dr. Fauci says we don't know that.
Right.
So.
And it should be noted that the prospect of having a hotly contested proverbial bodies on the floor, contested convention where people are fighting it out for the nomination on the floor, like having that remotely is almost impossible to imagine if we've got a nomination by
so if we have a solid victory by, say, Joe Biden, where he has all the delegates he needs before the convention, then this is easier to arrange. But I think they've got to arrange the possibility of individual delegates not being able to show up. If you feel a little bit sick a couple of days before the convention, don't come. But then how does that delegate vote? And they've got to figure out a way to do that.
Wow. So I'm just going to say right off the bat, good thing the majority of Sanders supporters are young, under the age of 60, and are healthier than a lot of the 65 and older Biden supporters, of which there are probably like 400. And we're going to show up. That's the thing. Here's what I want everybody to get out of this. They are already pushing this idea. We can't have this convention all the way in July. I mean, it's March right now. I mean, yes, this virus could be here for 5 to 6 months, but there is no way that it's going to be there. You know, if they cancel this convention, what they're going to try to do is push Joe Biden through the loop, like he said, arrange this. And I love how she mentions the hot bodies in this contested convention. That's the whole point. They don't want this. There's an estimated 50,000 people that are going to go to Milwaukee right now. And people are going to go, I think, regardless of what the government says. They are that angry, and they are afraid of what's happening, of the uprise of people, because people are very angry. They don't know this, but there's a lot of organizing going on. And I think they more than the coronavirus,
Yeah.
They want to
These people are disgusting.
They are
really
disgusting.
They're so fucked up. I can't stand mainstream media. Really, that they're sitting there and are actually bragging and propping up.
And
Joe
they prop
Biden.
up Joe Biden. Yeah.
I mean, come on,
if
ladies
Joe
and gentlemen.
Biden
You really
gets
want
the
this
nomination.
guy? This guy. Let me tell you something. Oh my God, Joe Biden is a worse candidate than Hillary.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard.
Tough.
That's saying a lot. That's saying a lot because at least you know what I'm saying. And we had talks about our health and whatnot. Joe Biden has got just straight up just dementia. And really, you want us to believe that all these people went out there and voted for him? Get the hell out of here. Canceling schools and universities seems like a great idea, but who is that convenient for, fam?
Right, fam. So across the Midwest in states where Bernie Sanders has yet to go against Joe Biden, Arizona, which actually Bernie did pretty well last time, but they closed a lot of polling stations. Ohio, Illinois, and Wisconsin have majorly canceled schools. Wisconsin in particular has canceled all of the schools, and they are making sure that the students don't return until after the primary on April 7th. So the primary is on April 7th. They're not returning until April 10th. How convenient that they do not return until then.
And we know the early voting always goes to the more moderate to conservative person. Always. The late voting goes to the liberal to progressive voting. It's always been that way. It's the formula. And that's why in Arizona last year in 2016, well, the lady couldn't give any reasoning why. In 2016, she closed 70% of the polling stations. That was like the registrar of Arizona. I forget her title name. Same thing over here. But they profited off of long lines. Remember, Arizona was called quickly, like 1% of the vote was in. They called it for Hillary. And it was so confusing because Bernie Sanders had already won Michigan. He won it in a fashion like the way he won Nevada. So you got to always expect that's when the establishment will pull out their tricks. What'd they do? They closed 70% of the polling places. Right now they're trying to do it in Wisconsin. Not let the kids come back. Don't get that late voting in because that voting is going to put progressive voting is what's going on. And that's what a lot of these ballots that haven't even come in, like in California, their lady voting goes for Sanders. So they did the same method. They jammed up the lines because they didn't want Sanders voters getting in those lines and voting against the establishment. And they're doing the same thing right here. Every little trick of the trade's coming out.
And so we got to figure out how to organize around this because this is like a recipe, the worst thing that could happen for Bernie Sanders at this point. I mean, it's just, he can't say go canvass because people are in danger. By the way, I know for a fact that people were told not to go canvass in Arizona. They completely shut down any sort of canvassing in Arizona and nationally. This is from my sources. So the canvassing right now is shut down. Okay. Phone bank, do whatever you can to get these students registered or go to a different polling place if they're not on campus or to their home polling place. Because unfortunately, this is going to take away a lot of votes from Bernie Sanders. And while he can't say, oh, this shouldn't happen, because obviously it's declared a pandemic worldwide, there has to be a way to organize around this. And not enough people are paying attention to how this is affecting our elections. And it's going to be a disaster for the campaign if they are not prepped for this. So people, like we mentioned in Washington, are having a lot of issues right now. This is disgusting
is what this is, fam.
And Bernie retweeted this, actually. It said, Michael Hobbs I just went into Seattle's UW Medical Center to ask how much patients are being charged for a coronavirus test. And they are being charged $100 to $500 if they have insurance, $1,600 if they don't, $1,600 if they don't have health insurance.
I got that.
Then he said,
yeah, right.
He asked, I thought the governor was given assurances that the test would be free. And the ER check-in receptionist said, well, we're hearing some crazy stuff. Then he said he also stopped by the Swedish and Harborview hospitals, who assured him that there would be costs, but said no one in the building could offer any more specifics. The receptionist there said, gave him the number of the Washington State Health Department, and
also,
he got 2 free masks.
Woo!
Yay,
Johnny, we got some masks for sales. We got a box of them, right? They're not the good one, but we can sell them.
And then he gave us an update at UW Medical Center's billing department, got back to him and said the test now has a CPT code and an estimated cost of $250 without insurance. That doesn't cover any other services, only the test itself. If you know someone who has been tested and billed, let me know. And there's another person that commented and said, my test was 1,700 all said and done. I was required to get a full respiratory panel, including 7 to 8 PCR tests for various flus, pneumonia, etc. I applied for charity care. I literally am just finishing chemotherapy for lymphoma. Perhaps they are talking about this full panel. This is disgusting. And this is affecting people more, obviously, like this person who has had chemotherapy and has lymphoma and has diseases. And so the bottom line is, I want to read this tweet by Benjamin Dixon, who's actually always been a neoliberal up until recently. So he said, the government is really trying to decide whether or not to just let all of us get infected to avoid showing us exactly how critically important workers and consumers are to capitalism and how efficient socialism would be resolving this. So this is the key here. The government, okay, is trying to pretty much not let anybody see how this is a moment where you need to speak up. You need to rise up. This is how capitalism fails. This is why we need all these social safety nets.
Yeah.
This is precisely why.
Well, I mean, and the fact that we call it social safety nets, it really shouldn't be called that.
No.
We should just allot our tax dollars from our fugazi monetary system anyway.
Fugazi.
We make we're the manufacturer of our own dollar. We can never run out of it. You know what I'm saying?
They have that for the rich, but they refuse to give it to the poor. That's the whole point.
It was weird because he was doing my latest video, which is a cut up of when we talked about some of the issues I had with senators moving forward as far as, things are concerned. Because I can tell you this much right now, moving forward, no matter what, we need to really move forward with our election integrity harder than we've ever given before. If we don't get our elections straight, and you're seeing it right here in the case of Bernard Sanders of what's going on, if we don't address our elections, and none of our elections across this country are owned by the citizens, they're paid for federally, publicly paid elections through our taxes, but they're owned by corporations, and the tactics they use, the actual governing bodies across, they're in the tank for it. You know what I'm saying? They're part of the problem of election integrity. We never addressed it in 2016, and until we kick it in the butt, we're not getting anything. We're not getting anything. And it just so happens that the coronavirus comes right now, and all these issues that we have to talk about, we've never had the people in place, for the legislation to protect our citizens, these social safety nets that we call them. No, it's just allotting our tax dollars to protect us, to working people, to help us, instead of the elites.